The connection between an artist and their art is a lot deeper than most of us could comprehend. We often get lost in inspiration for our creations as we put all our blood, sweat, and tears into making something that is special to us. Sometimes we get so consumed by it that the line between reality and fiction gets blurred, and we suffocate in it. Like an empty, bottomless abyss, it envelops us, takes us over. And the darkest part about it is, we can never truly notice it until it is too late. I, myself, have been caught staring down into that abyss. There's this video game. A game so perfectly well crafted it changes your perception of what a good game is altogether. And when you get around to making a video or a discussion board on said game, my mind wanders for hours, to days, to weeks, to months on end. How could I add more to the conversation on such a work of art that hasn't already been said? Why would I talk about a game that others have already endlessly praised up and down? What more do I have to offer? And most importantly, is it worth it?
Oh, hi there, Spec. It's me, Ben Starr, aka Verso and Expedition 33. And Klutzy thought, wouldn't it be cool on your 26th birthday if I wished you a very, 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 very happy birthday. I know how much you fall in love with Verso. I know how much you fall in love with the game. And we just thought, wouldn't it be great if Verso just said, hey, Spec, happy birthday. I know what it's like to be quite old. I've lived quite a few lifetimes, and 26 feels good. Take it in. Thank you so much for, by the sounds of it, Spec, committing to a cool video discussing Expedition 33. But I've been told by Klutzy that it's taking a long time. Are you going to wait until your 33rd birthday, Spec? Until you release it? No. Today, on your birthday, what I want you to do is to celebrate your birthday by working on that video. Do it for me. Do it now. Celebrate. Happy birthday, Spec, on finishing the video about Expedition 33. Get back to work. I'm telling you right now, I'm looking you in the eyes and saying, Spec, do this for me. Do this for Lumiere. Do it for the canvas. Do it for everything. Please. Please. I need you. Have an amazing, amazing, amazing day. I hope you have been surrounded by beautiful, amazing people. I can't wait to see the video when it's released. That will be awesome. I know that the entire team and all the cast love watching videos and people talking about the game, how much they love it, how much it means to them. It's just an incredibly special project. You're great. You deserve to have the best day in the world. Thank you for loving the game. Thank you for appreciating the work. We so dearly, and me in particular, appreciate you. But get back to work and finish that video, because I want to watch it. Happy birthday.
There is an age-old question out there about whether or not video games are considered an art form, and the answer to this question is always consistently divided between yes and no. For me, I consider them just as legitimate as movies and other mediums. They require just as much attention to detail, care, and love to create as anything else, something that, unfortunately, seems to have not become so prevalent throughout the last few generations. That is, until every now and then, once in a blue moon every single year, you find a diamond in the rough that shines like a bright light on the rest of the industry. And the development studio that has created the latest diamond that shines like the sun is a little studio by the name of Sandfall Interactive. The story of this studio is one that is shrouded in mystery and leaves people in absolute disbelief. We have a studio made by Ubisoft devs, a lead producer who's never been a game dev before but rather worked for the French equivalent of Uber before joining the studio, a writer who has never published her work before and was found on Reddit, a musician who was found on such an obscure music forum by a stroke of either luck or divine intervention by God himself. For more details, I'm going to share a video by the name of SkillUps on the game that goes into detail about the studio and then some. Links will be in the description below.
Expedition 33, but after I'd felt all the things that I felt, I was like, okay, I gotta find out who these Sandfall people are. And that's when things got really crazy, because when I started looking into it, I simply couldn't believe what I was reading. I'm sure you know some of that story already, like the fact that the writer, Jen Svedberg-Yen, had never had a single word of her writing published before, and she was found via a Reddit post, or the fact that the game's composer, Lorien Testad, had never had any music published before, and was found not on SoundCloud as some had claimed, but on a tiny random music forum that Testad had never been to or posted on, and that the game's director, Guillaume Broche, had never been to or posted on, but owing to a random post that Testad made on a whim, these two found each other, and 8 hours of music later, here we are, with a soundtrack that is just as chart-topping as the game itself. So that's what you might have heard, but believe me when I tell you that that is not the half of it. Did you know this game's lead producer and the manager of the studio had never worked in game dev before and was working at the French equivalent of Uber before joining Sandfall? Did you know that the game's art director had also never worked in game dev and was working at an events management company before this? Did you know that this game's animator was found via his YouTube channel and he worked part-time on the game's animations before recruiting his animation buddies to work on this for a bit of fun on the side, and that none of them ever worked on this full-time? Did you know that most of the people at Sandfall are either graduates or incredibly early in their careers? Most of the people who made this video game, from the senior leadership all the way down, had never made a game before. How on earth do you then suddenly make one of the best games of the year, one of the best games of this generation, and one of the best JRPGs full stop, and it wasn't even made in Japan? Trying to answer these questions became an obsession for like 2 weeks. I read every article, I watched every interview, I scoured Twitter and Reddit and YouTube. I even went on LinkedIn. Ew.
All these point to them all coming together like the video game Avengers to create what is considered to be one of the best video game experiences of all time, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I have been contemplating how I wanted to talk about this game for a long time now, hence why this video took so long to make. Many of those who have been following this channel know how much I have been keeping tabs on Expedition 33 leading up to the game's release. Well, now the game has been out for a couple of months, and I honestly cannot express how just happy that I am with how this game has been received. It's made an all-time peak of over 145k players on Steam, sitting at a 93 on Metacritic, and also has the highest rated user score for a game of its type, and even sold, no joke, 3.3 million copies in 33 days. The jokes write themselves, honestly. In fact, actually, hold on. When I made this script, guess how many pages it is? 33. Oh man. Anyway, all of this news made me more and more excited to the point where I bought the game twice. And now with more than 50 hours into this game combined between 2 different platforms, I can very confidently say that this game exceeds my expectations and surpasses to levels I couldn't even comprehend. It is a masterpiece through and through, nailing everything in terms of combat, world design, graphics and art direction, RPG mechanics, story, and boss fight encounters. But the real reason I wanted to talk about this game is how much it has impacted me on a personal level, with the messages that it brings, things that I learned, and I cannot wait to finally dissect it all, so let's go ahead and marvel at this beautiful canvas. 2 disclaimers. 1. I will be spoiling everything about the story in this video. It is the only way that I can be able to get what I want to say to come across the way I want to. So if you haven't played it, or are still playing it, and if you trust me, I recommend you turn this video off, buy the game, go play the game for yourself, and then come back and watch this video. Also, I will be talking about this game very differently than the other videos that I have done, and we'll talk about the game in a more unorthodox method, as I will be going in through the chronological events surrounding the story, rather than discussing it in its own separate aspects of the game like I usually do. It deserves that level of time and respect from me. Now, without further ado, this is, finally, my long-awaited love letter to Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Tomorrow comes. The game opens innocently enough with a gorgeous shot of what looks like to be a warped Eiffel Tower, a beautiful landscape to accompany it, and a couple small but distinct musical notes. Listen. We are then introduced to our first major character looking over the ocean, Gustav, played by, remarkably, Charlie Cox. Charlie Cox casually giving one of the best performances of the year, despite only apparently being in the studio for less than 4 hours, is just small little tip of the giant iceberg that is how impressive this game is. So much so that even Charlie himself has talked about how he feels like a total fraud for not mentioning it whatsoever. Anyway, we catch Gustav throwing rocks into the ocean before we are then introduced to our second major character, Myel, played by Jennifer English. After a dark joke between the two, which I approve.
If you're gonna give someone flowers, you should probably do it before they wither and die.
What, the flower? Or Sophie?
Ooh, dark. Sophie would approve.
They mentioned preparations for a festival, and the dialogue here is honestly kind of really good right off the bat. You can kind of see that their chemistry just oozes out of their performances right out of the bat, and it's easily noticeable.
Have you tried throwing with your other arm instead? If you could hit the Paintress directly, that would actually be useful.
You know, hobbies don't always have to be useful. I'm enjoying the uselessness of today and readying my usefulness for tomorrow. And soon, I'll get to do a lot more than throw rocks.
After the cutscene ends, you are immediately hit with some of the most gorgeous visuals I've ever witnessed. You are given a tutorial about how movement and traversal works, as well as a combat tutorial to get you used to the mechanics, so you are prepared for what is to come. The dialogue here is also really quippy as well.
Now, don't you feel better? I see your smile.
Once that ends, you go down into the streets and are introduced to Gustav's old flame, Sophie, played by Billy Fulford Brown. Once again, the dialogue and performances are incredibly noticeable, and it leads to some adorkable chemistry. Yes, I said adorkable. Sue me. You gonna tell me that I'm wrong?
Stubborn people change the world, and you are the most stubborn person I know. Thank you.
You continue to explore across the land of Lumiere.
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 Alternating between Gustav and Sophie as you progress, having a couple of exchanges with certain NPCs, helping them out with specific needs, or playing a couple of minigames. You even get to see an interesting creepy little mime in the corner, and it won't be the only time that you see them. Wink, wink. Once you get accustomed to the world and explore what Lumiere has to offer, you and Sophie walk over to the harbor, meet up with your apprentices, and are given your uniform. And then we reach the pin drop moment. I'll let it play out for you all to witness.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it when I say this is probably one of my favorite prologues to a video game ever. It establishes everything we need to know about the world right from the onset. The 5 W's, who, what, where, why, and how, are answered right from the beginning. We know the motivations of our main lead, Gustav, and most importantly, we know what is at stake in this world. We know exactly what we have to lose should our characters fail. All within the span of one opening segment, and all of it accompanied with just some of the best music to ever grace your ears. And it won't be the only time I mention this. It is all just told so beautifully and shown with such care and finesse. There's a really unique vibe to it. There is a reason why this clip of the game brings just so much emotion to other players right out of the gate. Because honestly, how far have we come that we've seen another opening to a game invoke just so much emotion right at the beginning? It honestly is just such a breath of fresh air to see. Anyway, we then cut to later that evening where we have the Expedition Festival before our heroes depart for their main quest. You talk to all your friends, get tokens to unlock early game items and cosmetics, and after another duel with Myel, we then are greeted by Gustav's sister before we set off. This section is honestly just as good too, with great dialogue all around, and we learn more about the history and the importance of these expeditions, and why they are necessary to go and defeat the Paintress. After talking with your sister, we set off with a great, albeit cliche speech, and with a montage before we embarked to the continent to finally put a stop to the Paintress once and for all. Then, we get our title drop. After this, we finally land on the shores of our mysterious continent, and are introduced to this game's biggest aura farmer. Get acquainted with this face, you're gonna see him a lot. But of course, there is just something rather curious about him, and once one of our expeditioners continue to talk to him, we realize he kinda just doesn't really have a good head on his shoulders.
Which expedition are you from? Fucking snap out!
Well, that didn't quite go so well. Thus begins Act 1, Gustav. We cut to see that Gustav is now the only survivor of the attack, and is stuck in this new continent completely alone and barely hanging on. One thing I really loved about this scene in particular is that Gustav is shown to have what looks like to be a panic attack, and the acting is just incredibly good and believable. I was honestly getting actually seriously worried for him. Bro watched his love die right in front of his eyes, and then later watches his entire team supposedly get the equivalent when the Suicide Squad basically gave a 360 no-scope to Pete Davidson. I can easily see him being overwhelmed by this, and it's honestly a really good interpretation of a panic attack. I didn't expect that. Good job. We are then introduced to our first location in the game called Spring Meadows. And after our first enemy encounter, as well as introducing us to the Expedition Flag system, that's basically the Dark Souls bonfire system that will come in handy throughout the game. We walk around deeper and deeper into this new world and see piles upon piles of bodies of other expeditioners inside a cave, and the way that they're strung about literally just seems like something out of a horror film, and it's honestly pretty haunting. Doubly so when we get this cutscene of Gustav laying near this pile of corpses, completely overwhelmed and feeling hopeless, and then manifests his gun into thin air in order to kill himself. This is a genuinely dark scene, as it feels after seeing this mountain of bodies racks Gustav with this feeling of hopelessness. But before he can then pull the trigger and go full-blown Persona 3, another familiar face of Gustav sits next to him.
You do that, we both die.
This is Lune, played by Kirsty Ryder, aka Quentin Tarantino's foot fetish given physical form. No. I know how my audience is, and I'm gonna stop the memes right away. Stop it. Lune is an interesting character, as she seems to be the very do-it-by-the-book, headstrong, go-getter character whose main goal is to learn everything there is to know about this world and is determined to see the expedition through to do so. She is an extremely driven and determined character, and this level of being able to keep moving forward kind of clashes with Gustav's feeling of hopelessness attitude in this moment. After the conversation gets rudely cut off by another giant monster, Gustav then gets his fight back and we are given a tutorial to Lune's gameplay, which we'll get to more later on. We then see Gustav test out his new invention he created for this expedition called the Lumina Converter, which allows us to equip these special tools called Pictos in order to continue to get stronger. With Lune in our party now officially, we continue to make it through Spring Meadows, and now I kind of want to take a bit of a tangent to talk about one of the best parts of this game that is immediately apparent since frame 1, the game's unique art direction. I have said on numerous occasions that I am of the belief that art direction is incredibly important when wanting to make your video game distinct, but more recently, I think we have sacrificed art direction and style for graphical fidelity. I'm not going to pretend like video games today like Horizon, Death Stranding, The Last of Us don't look graphically impressive, because they do. Technology has definitely evolved in terms of how games can look compared to generations ago. However, the problem with being graphically impressive is that they're only that. They're only graphically impressive and nothing else. It's kind of like Avatar in that sense. Far too often, we have seen graphics definitely have gotten better, but the uniqueness of each game has gotten worse, and as they all start to look and feel the same, especially in the AAA industry. The push for realism in video games, while it looks impressive for a time, can't keep people's attention for any longer, as it suffocates any form of style and art direction when it is important to have a good balance of both. The Last of Us looks like the Callisto Protocol, which looks like God of War, which looks like Horizon, which looks like basically every freaking Unreal Engine 5 game ever. If you're going to make your game have outstanding graphics, the world that you're creating has to at least be visually interesting first. Now, I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, as obviously there are exceptions to the rule, and we are seeing more and more games that focus more on the style than the graphics, but that's just it. There are exceptions to the rule when they shouldn't be. Expedition 33 is an example of the exceptions to the rule. Not only does the game look phenomenally graphic-wise, the game also has some of the best art direction I have ever seen from a game that looks like this. It is the perfect balance between graphical fidelity and realism, as well as having a good art direction and style. I think another good example of this is Alan Wake 2, but I gushed about that game enough. Every part of the game looks like it was beautifully painted and fully realized to make it one of the most visually distinct gaming worlds of this current generation. This is what sets this game apart from other games of its genre right now, and it is still, for me, the most visually impressive game of the year, and it's not even close. People point to games this year like Death Stranding 2 and Ghost of Yotei currently, and yeah, I can see it, but for me, nothing comes close to the perfect balance of graphics and art direction that Expedition 33 offers. Anyway, after we fight a couple of enemies, kill a mime, and then get used to doing more traversal like climbing walls, we then come across a jar-type creature sitting there by itself and a journal entry from one of the previous expeditions, more specifically, Expedition 81. These journal entries are basically audio logs that you collect over the course of the game, and they just serve as additional context for the story in-universe. After talking with the creature and traversing through the rest of Spring Meadows, we get our first major boss fight. This is an Iveki? I don't know how to pronounce it. A huge and freaky creature that summons stones from the ground and has a huge hole in its chest, and you beat him by exploiting his weakness in his chest. It also has a great cinematic ending after you beat him too. After you kill the Efeki, we find a message on the wall that says someone took Myel into a place with weird corals, and to look for a door inside a hut. Gustav, rightly, immediately wants to go and find her, and Lune, being by the book person that she is, sees too many red flags in the message. For starters, not only would an expeditioner sign their messages, but they would also wait and regroup for 3 days and stay where the message is. So rightly, she suspects it may be a trap. Both of their ways of doing things clash immediately with each other, and once again, the dialogue here is just phenomenal. We leave Spring Meadows and are immediately greeted with the game's world map. And by God, the visuals continue to be absolutely stellar when we head to Flying Waters. Side note, Expedition 33's world design is something we will discuss over time, but it is incredibly well designed. But it also kind of shoots the game in the foot a little bit much later, so keep that in mind. Before we walk to Flying Waters though, Lune recommends that we set up camp and rest before doing so. The cutscene we get as we set up camp is very character-centric, and it showcases why the writing is just so good. Both characters have their own ideologies and motivations that clash with each other, and it makes the conversations all the more interesting. They disagree with each other and their ideals clash, which makes their dynamic all the more fascinating. Gustav is wallowing in grief and feels like their quest is utterly pointless, which, I mean, I can totally understand. He watched his entire squad get murdered the minute that they stepped foot here. And they're supposed to go up against a near omnipotent being on their own, and Myel, who he's supposed to be the guardian for, is out there completely alone dealing with God knows what. Lune is determined to see the expedition through because that's what they're supposed to do. The oath she emphasizes is, when one falls, we continue. Which, I mean, she's right. Gustav and Myel both accept the oath before they embarked on this expedition, and so it's imperative they endured to the end, no matter the cost, and again, the performance and dialogue is just... Okay, I've already gushed about it enough, just have a look.
Fuck the mission, Lune! What are we gonna do, huh? Tell me, what are we gonna do? We're gonna take down the Paintress, just the 3 of us? My gun and your sparks?
I didn't take you for a coward.
I'm not a coward.
You swore the oath. When one falls, we continue.
Yes, I know.
When one falls. When one falls. Not if, when. We knew not all of us would make it, but we continue. As long as even one of us stands, our fight is not over.
But I'm not afraid to fight, it's just Myel, she's...
Myel swore the same oath.
I know that!
She chose her life. You and I... Come on, we always said the future of Lumiere is more important than
any individual life, yes.
Do you still believe that? Do you still believe that? Fuck the mission. Really?
Sorry.
We then make our way to Flying Waters. Flying Waters is again yet another amazing level. Plenty of interesting new enemies, gorgeous art direction and visuals, the floating fish everywhere, and it weirdly looks like they're underwater but they're really not. Kinda reminds me of Ash Lake from Dark Souls. But yeah, it's really damn good. And you finally found the small house in a hut like the message said. Inside is a massive mansion with multiple locked doors. As you explore the mansion, you finally find Myel in a room safe and unharmed, and we are introduced to somebody who probably doesn't feel like you're welcomed here.
With him. He's been helping me a lot. He reinforced all my pictos.
What is he?
I'm not sure. He doesn't really talk.
Nah, just kidding. This is the Curator, and he's supposedly the one who found Myel and brought her here safely. and teaches us more about the gameplay mechanics. And now, with our third party member acquired, it is now finally time to talk about the turn-based combat of Expedition 33. A lot of people on this channel know very well that before all this, I didn't like turn-based combat. I always maintained that it wasn't for me because I found it to be boring and an unintuitive system that just bored the hell out of me. Baldur's Gate 3 was the exception, however, that I loved because not only was the characters, story, and world so fascinating, but its turn-based gameplay was actually fun, interactive, and diverse. But in a general sense, whenever my friends would recommend a turn-based RPG like your Final Fantasies, your Personas, and your Shin Megami Tenseis, I would always write it off as something that would not keep my interest in mind for long periods of time. I owe every one of those people an apology, because I was not familiar with how fun turn-based combat gameplay can be after playing this game. And once I finished it, Final Fantasy 1 through 6, Look Outside, and Metaphor Refantasio managed to magically show up in my libraries. Let's go ahead and break it down why I love the turn-based combat in this so much, and it honestly can be broken down to 5 simple descriptions: real-time interactivity, character and build diversity, weapon variety, enemy variety, and boss fight encounters. Expedition 33 as a turn-based game has everything you expect from a game like this. Your basic attacks, your skills you unlock via a skill tree that costs action points, or AP for short, and your potions, 3 of them to be exact. 1 to recover health, to recover AP, and to revive a dead party member. Your team is limited to 3 party members, each with their own unique abilities and skills that are unique and honestly really fun to play around with. I couldn't find a single character in this game that I did not like, because each of them have their own unique style and mechanics that benefits not only themselves, but the team as well. Gustav is a very melee-focused character and has an overdrive mechanic. Every attack that you do on the opponent builds up this overdrive meter on his cybernetic arm at a max of 10, and once the gauge is full, you can then use the overdrive skill and give them a good old Kentucky Fried crack to expel that gauge for massive damage, as he then states, "For those who come after." Gustav is a very straightforward character, but a very fun character gameplay-wise nonetheless, all things considered. Lune, however, is essentially the mage character of the group. She has all the different kinds of spells you would expect from a mage-type character: your fire spells, your water spells, your lightning spells, and healing spells, and even having the ability to revive other party members. However, what makes her so unique is that these spells are all called stains, and these stains can be mixed together into fun and dangerous concoctions. She has a chance to build up to 4 stains for every spell that you use, and each of them can give unique benefits to turn the tide of combat. The immolation skill does burn damage, but you can consume a blue stain in order to do increased damage and burn the enemy further. The healing light skill can heal and remove status effects to 1 ally, but consuming 2 green stains makes that skill cost 0 AP. Same thing for the rebirth skill, but you can revive 1 ally, and when you consume 3 yellow stains, it costs no AP as well. Down the line, the more you level her up, you will then encounter other skills like Mayhem, which has a chance to break, aka stun the enemy, if you consume 4 stains of any kind, or my personal favorite, the Elemental Trick and Elemental Genesis combo. The Elemental Trick allows you to do every kind of elemental damage she has, and it generates a separate stain per color. You combine this with the Elemental Genesis skill, which can only activate by having 4 separate stain colors, and well, let's just say you get to commit genocide on any poor soul who gets hit with it.
Meet your reckoning.
Get ready.
Lune is the textbook definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing character gameplay-wise. She is absolutely one of my favorite characters to play as. One character that I will always keep in a slot on my roster. Myel is more of a glass cannon stance type of character that wields a rapier and has 3 separate stances: offensive, defensive, and virtuose, and each one of these stances changes depending on what attacks you use. The offensive stance has you dealing 50% extra damage, but you take increased damage also. Defensive stance has you take 50% less damage, but you gain an extra AP per dodge or parry, and the virtuoso stance has you dealing 200% more damage all throughout. Switching up your stances is the name of the game when playing as Myel, as it helps maximize your potential playing as her. because if you don't, she then goes to a stanceless phase, which basically gives her no benefits. As you can tell, I adore these characters gameplay-wise, but that is only scratching the surface of what I consider to be one of the better parts of the combat, the real-time interactivity. In each enemy encounter, you have a parry, jump, and dodge mechanic that you can do during your enemy's turn. The dodge is the easiest of these to do as it has the most immunity frames of the three, but the parry mechanic, now that's where the spice is at. The best way I could describe the parry system is, think of it being similar to Sekiro, where enemies have a specific timing unique to them and it requires memorizing attack patterns, and then you get to finish them off with a powerful counterattack. And it's honestly just really damn good and satisfying. It kind of turns the game into a more high-risk, high-reward system, and it fixes one of the biggest problems I've always had with turn-based games. And that is, I just want to interact more with them. A part of the reason why I wasn't a fan of turn-based games as a concept is that I want to interact with the gameplay instead of taking damage that I could easily do something about in other different genres. This is not a flaw with turn-based games as a whole, really. It's just more of a personal cross that I bear that kept me from experiencing the genre the way it was intended. Expedition 33, however, allows me to interact with the game more, as well as being able to strategize the way a turn-based game does. Now, I know this type of turn-based game is not anything new and not really breaking any new grounds as other games like Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi, to name a few, but I think Expedition 33 is one of the best utilizations of it. Now, of course, you will encounter certain attacks that can't be parried, which is why we have the jump mechanic. Jumping allows you to dodge and attack, as well as then quickly counterattacking the enemy. All three of these mechanics add a whole new layer to the gameplay that just makes the general gameplay loop all the more fun and just really replayable. There's also the free aim shots where you can aim at an opponent's weak spot and leave them open for more punishment. But even then, we still are not done when you throw in the actual character and build diversity and weapon variety. Throughout the game, you will find these items called Pictos. Pictos are special items that you get throughout the game that you give either better stats or special benefits. Some of them give you added combos to your basic attack, extra AP after killing one enemy, or the ability to apply burn to all attacks. Some of them even allow you to revive with 100%, or allow you to, say, repeat turns. It creates such a fun and unique experience as the gameplay opens up tremendously even further with this system. But then it gets even better when you add Luminas to the mix. Luminas are Pictos that then turn into basic passives that you can keep after you use a Pictos for a certain amount of plays. So you have the characters and their already unique skill sets, and then you have the Pictos on top of that add more on top of it, and then you have the Luminas that allows you to keep those benefits. Can I just say, can I just express how much I love this? I love this. It adds so much more dimension to the gameplay, and it is just so much fun to just experiment. It leads to genuine build flexibility. It leads just some of the most insane and broken builds out there.
I'm gonna have to go right here for this hit to land.
I can do it.
Yeah, you can. Here we go. Here we go. $26 million fucking damage, bro! Dude, holy shit!
This is also not even accounting for the amount of weapons there are in the game. Each weapon you get throughout the game even has their own stats and unique abilities to them that adds even more to the gameplay depending on the level of the weapon that you can unlock via the curator back at camp. Some weapons can apply their own debuffs, turning any light damage into physical damage instead, or apply specific stains per free aim shot, or when stains are consumed. Like, there's just so much. And it's just so overwhelming at first, but the more you play the game, the more it just becomes second nature. And after a while, your characters just feel like gods in their own right. And there's even more so on top of that, but I don't want to lose the plot here, so we'll go ahead and save those for later. Anyway, You prepare to leave Flying Waters, fight a couple of big monsters, one that likes to eat people quite a lot. Then you head your way to the Ancient Sanctuary, yet another gorgeous location which also holds one of the best locations in the game, the Gestal Village. The Gestals are some of the best parts of the game. They love to fight and show respect to those who they deem as mighty warriors. The Gestals are mostly a carefree kind of species and just have very little in brains but make up for it even more so in brawn. They also make for most of the comedy within the game, and it always brings a smile on my face every time they're on screen. And this area is where we go to meet the chieftain of the Gestal village named Golgra, because in order to get across the sea further into the continent, you must find Sqa, which also requires a password. However, she also mentions that only the strongest and greatest of warriors are able to meet Sqa, so you must challenge all their strongest warriors and someone else called the Stranger. So you make your way through the strongest of Gestals pretty much with ease before you are acquainted with this Stranger. This is Ciel, played by Shala Nyx, who is your next party member you are surprised is not only still alive, but seems to be friendly with the Gestals in the area. Ciel, gameplay-wise, is really fun to play as well. Her gameplay consists of these foretell charges and uses specific skills applies certain charges. The three charges are Sun, Moon, and Twilight. Sun charges allow you to gain 1 AP per foretell consumed, and Moon allows you to gain 1 AP per foretell applied on the target. But if you combine the two, it turns into the Twilight charges that lasts up to 2 turns. Twilight charges apply double the foretell, and max amount of foretell you can apply doubles from 10 to 20. And again, the damage is increased depending on how many Sun and Moon charges that you have. All this makes for Ciel to be one hell of a damage dealer and a fun one to play as to boot. Once you win the tournament, Golgra will tell you the password, which is "Get out of my way," and shouting that as loud as you possibly can. Odd, but quite fitting for a group of Gestals. The Gestal village is just such a fun location overall. So many great aspects of the environment, more loot and fun conversations to be had with the Gestals, and it's just a really lighthearted and funny segment that makes for a great little break from playing Trauma Bingo throughout the rest of the game. You then head back to camp before going on to your next location, and then...
Alicia, I told you to stay home. It's not good for you to see this. Yes, I understand. It's her fault, and she doesn't even know it. But you can't be here.
What are you talking about? What's my fault? What is this?
You should never have come. You're only going to make things worse for everyone. Now take your friends and go home. Let them spend their final year in peace. This is your only warning.
I can't wait to see...
Myel?
I want you to keep in mind these small little segments because these will come back later into the story, but it does make you even more curious for what else is going on. But the comedy goes even further because up next we go to Sqa's nest, where we get probably the second funniest scene in the whole game.
Come on, don't be shy.
Get out of my way!
Jeez, lupa kima ba parino.
No, it's just that... it's the password.
Rico femicola, gor granda bari bombi no passwordito. Gomiku rapito sava.
Look, I am very sorry. It's just that Golgra told us that's the password, and
Come on, it's a Gestal. He'll have forgotten in about a minute.
Again, Charlie Cox just crushes it and gives an outstanding performance, and he's just the highlight every time he's on screen. We make it through this gorgeous little cave, and we meet one of the best characters in any video game ever, Sqa. And I mean it when I say that he needs no other introduction. Just listen to him.
Fantastic. Good luck, mes amis. Please, bring Florrie back to me.
You seem to know me.
Yes.
How? I don't understand.
Men treat no...
He's adorable, and this whole segment is genuinely funny because the whole point of it is that you have to bug his neighbor Francois for a rock that helps him swim with everyone aboard that he keeps forgetting. The dialogue is exceptionally good here and genuinely pretty funny.
I am not a rock. Do you have rocks for eyes? You certainly have rocks for brains. I am clearly a turtle. Esquier! Stop sending hooligans over here!
Stop being a meanie. They're nice humans.
Then keep them on your side of the caves! Now get off my lawn!
You then bring the rock back to Esquier, only to then find out that Francois tricked you and gives you something else, so then you have to go to the Stonewave Cliffs where you find the real Florrie. Stonewave Cliffs is our next location, and it's a pretty little neat area with some very unique enemies. One of my favorite enemies in the game is this Great Sword Cultist, where she can stab herself to give herself more armor, as well as making her sword big enough to attack every member of your party, and also making sure if I don't compensate very much. Might as well talk about the enemy design overall, since I mentioned it a bit, and it's just as fantastic and reactive as the combat. The enemy variety is honestly surprisingly far bigger than I expected, and it's really cool to see how many unique items there are with each location. They all have their own unique wacky designs, animations, attack timings, and mechanics to make themselves completely different than the next. They add their own flair to the gameplay that makes the combat all the more enticing. After fighting through a ton of enemies, they end up deeper and deeper into the cliffs, also noticing that there's a lot of lamps strung about. You then find a part of the caverns where as you walk forward, more lanterns begin to light up as you continue. And then we are met with this horrendous sight. The Lampmaster is a really fun little boss, has a fun little mechanic where you can shoot the lanterns to stop it from doing extra attacks, and in phase 2 you then have to shoot the lanterns in a sequence in order to prevent it from doing a sort of light attack that does basic extra damage. You then finally beat the horrific beast and find Florrie to give to Esquier, and you can now swim further towards the continent. Now, as you can tell throughout the video, it's been rather a lovely time. The team had some setbacks, but a lot of lives were lost, but for the most part, the team has been feeling rather confident currently as time goes on. You just got out of the Gestal village, you found Ciel, Myel, Lune, and you just feel the joy in this new wild world, and most of the combat from this point is extremely good and it leaves you feeling satisfied. Which is why it is that much more effective when, before everybody leaves, Myel and Gustav throw one last rock and you find that someone decided to do a little bit of target practice. Not gonna lie, this scene was genuinely really hard to watch, and it's just so heart-wrenching in several different ways. First off, the game prolongs the idea of whether or not Gustav is going to die, even having a little gameplay segment where you fight this white-haired dude to a point where he uses overdrive against him. And man, just the subtle details, the way his eyes go bloodshot red as soon as he gets hit, the way how she freezes up when it happens, the subtle shaking of his head when Myel tells him to run, and how he just continues to stay in front of Myel because, well, he's her guardian. And then you also have the monster just comes back up after you've beaten him where Ciel and Lune are, so they just can't really help either. And to top it all off, he then discards his robot arm, and then we have our first major death scene. As far as character deaths go, this one hit pretty hard for me. It goes doubly so when the white-haired dude starts to get closer as soon as she goes to Gustav's body, and just before he's about to attack, another person enters the fray.
Okay. I'll handle things here. Get back to your friends.
They have a conversation before the stranger tells Myel and her friends to escape. The dialogue is rather interesting here as well, and it leads to more questions than answers.
You set us down this path. But are you ready for the consequences?
She'll never paint again.
We then head back to camp, and the game continues to just hit you in the gut. Myel breaks down crying as SkillUps walks up to her and gives her a big hug. Honestly, just talking about it tears me up a bit because it's genuinely a crushing scene. But this wasn't the moment where the game got me. That comes later. The team grieves over their loss, Lune and Ciel share a moment together, and our mystery character shows himself to bring back Gustav's arm and asks to join the team? He mentions that he is also an expeditioner, more specifically, Expeditioner 0. The man on the cliff they saw was Renoir, their commander, and that because of the effects of the continent, not only did their bodies stop aging, but they're also not affected by the gommage. When questioned why he killed their whole team, he mentions this.
His immortality is a gift from the Paintress. Killing her would kill him too, and he enjoys living forever.
And you don't?
Burying everyone you know while you live on can weigh you down a bit.
And lastly, we get our mystery man's name.
What's your name?
Verso.
Thus begins Act 2, Verso. I want to take a bit to talk about Verso for a short moment. He is voiced by the incredibly talented Ben Starr, and his performance throughout the game is just phenomenal. He immediately strikes you as a very quiet and reserved character, but also a man who is just tired of the world and keeps to himself mostly because he doesn't quite tell the Forest story just yet, which leads to you to question whether or not he's trustworthy. But he also seems to be close friends with SkillUps, and that is all that matters. Literally, that's it. That's enough to convince me. I also want to touch on one aspect of the game that isn't really mentioned a lot, but it is worth pointing out. After Verso joins your team, we are then introduced to the friendship mechanic. You can have conversations with each of the party members, and each one boosts up their friendship level and even leads to some potential romances between Ciel and Lune depending on who you choose. I chose Ciel. Honestly, these moments you get throughout the game are honestly the best parts of it. When the game just starts to slow down and Verso just gets more in tune with the crew. It genuinely leads to some of the best character moments in the game, like this one where Verso and Myel play the piano together while SkillUps dances. Anyway, the next morning we get a pretty heart-wrenching scene afterwards with Verso and Myel. We then go to head to the monolith, and SkillUps now gains the ability to swim, which is a new mechanic across the world map. But to get further into the monolith, we must first get through the Forgotten Battlefield. As soon as we land, Myel asks if they could bury Gustav, to which Verso suggests a place protected by beautiful trees where they can bury his arm. After that, we are then introduced to a new enemy and a brand new game mechanic, gradient counters. Gradient counters and gradient attacks are special moves that our party members can use for up to 3 gradient charges, and these can be built up over the course of each fight. These deal massive damage and give more benefits to your already massive playstyle. While we're also talking more about the combat, let's talk about Verso's gameplay. After Gustav dies, I say as I shed a tear, Verso essentially takes his place, and honestly, he's a pretty fun character. His mechanic is a perfection meter. Think of games like, say, Devil May Cry, where the more damage you do to the enemies without taking damage, the higher the perfection rank goes at a max of an S rank. Each skill here acquires as you level up. He gains unique benefits depending on the ranking of your perfection meter, like increased damage, having it cost less AP, or recover max health as opposed to 50%. However, if you get hit by any of the attacks, the perfection rank drops to a lower rank. Verso is honestly a great addition to the team and my go-to damage dealer in the team. Anyway, we go through the Forgotten Battlefield, another gorgeous location with a beautiful sunset and fairly big level design full of secrets and enemies. After we get through the battlefield, we then get a pretty valid crash out.
Almost there.
Holding up. Everywhere we go, just death. Death and more death. Everywhere we go, just death. I don't want to see that anymore.
Look, Myel,
I thought you would understand. You said you spent your immortality burying the people around you. Doesn't any of this bother you? And you. Gustav's dead. How can you keep going like nothing happened?
Then things get interrupted when someone tries to crash the party, and we get our next major boss fight. This is Duelist, a Pontiff Sullivan wannabe that has combos for days and comes with his own phase 2 on top of that. Duelist is such a fun boss, and it leads to yet another pretty damn cool finisher. After beating him, we then reach the quarry that Verso was talking about, and this was the moment that got me emotionally. Gustav's burial. I'm not gonna lie to you, I cried like a bitch here. Seeing all the people buried by Verso, the way all the characters huddle together to put Gustav's arm in his grave, and just, again, outstanding dialogue from each of the cast while Verso watches. Genuinely, it broke me to tears because it finally sunk in that Gustav's dead. He's gone. But all of this is perfectly complemented with an outstanding score that hits you in the gut.
Say hi to Soph for me, yeah?
We could never tell if you were my brother or my father. But to me, you were both. Best brother and father I've ever had.
When one falls, we continue.
Thanks for being my family. In the next life.
Hits you like a freight train. Fucking magnificent. Rest in peace, Gustav. Tomorrow comes, brother. I'm sure by now you noticed I haven't really mentioned the music in general, but I think that's just because, not much else needs to be said about it. Everyone else has talked about it, and how much of a musical masterpiece it is. Music in general is just really important to me, and the music here, much like a painting, is perfectly crafted to complement and improve the rest of the game. It would be a much lesser experience without it. It's like having a perfectly cooked gourmet dish, but then you forgot to add the seasoning, so then it tastes like shit. It would just be missing without it. The OST is genuinely perfect, and I think about it non-stop, with it now being probably my favorite video game soundtrack of all time, with such a wide variety of different moods, different styles, which I will mention later in the video. Back at camp, Verso lays out their plan on how they can get to the Paintress, as well as heading to Monoko's station to recruit one of his oldest friends to fight against the Paintress and make their way to Old Lumiere, where they can take down the Paintress's heart. A part of Lumiere that was split off the continent after the fracture incident that started this whole mess. We then get to Monoko Station, and we are greeted with our final party member and one of the best characters in the game by far.
Slow as ever. More music.
Your reflexes remain sharp as ever. I approve.
This is Monoko, played by Rich Keeble, and I swear he is a character after my own heart. He is a Gestal who speaks fluent English after Verso taught him it, loves the thrill of the fight, and even fights you to get acquainted with you and your other party members. He also is kind of a smartass, and it leads to some of the best dialogue in the game by far, especially with Verso. They're hilarious together.
To what do we owe the pleasure of your company?
We're heading for Old Lumiere.
Okay, bye.
Hey, come on. Hey. Hey, look. I know we failed before, but look, you doofus. Don't you recognize her?
Of course I do.
Then you know what that means. This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
This is your only shot. Out of the question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
Gameplay-wise, he's my favorite in the game, as he is the textbook definition of a Swiss army knife. His entire playstyle is all about turning into other Nevrons, that's the enemies in the game that I didn't get to mention, that you fight throughout the game. And each enemy you kill, Monoko collects their feet for some reason. No, I know how my audience is. This does not vindicate any jokes about feet. Stop it. You know who you are. I'll slap you. Bad. Down. Anyway, he collects their feet and allows him to transform to any Nevron in the game, including specific bosses. And Monoko also consists of the Bestial Wheel, which contains 5 masks: Heavy, Agile, Caster, Balanced, and the Almighty. Each of these masks have their own Nevron and coincides with them, and gives Monoko different stats. Each skill you get has a corresponding mask it works best with, and each attack you do spins the Bestial Wheel to a different mask, and he's got so many different abilities based on each one, with the Almighty masks being the all-around one that works with no matter the skill. He is packed to the teeth with a crazy amount of skills, and he's one of the best characters in the game to play as by far. Oh, and remember when I mentioned I'd bring up the music later? Well, welcome to later, as Monoko's theme song? It slaps harder than your mama's chancla. Play it, Jax! Monoko overall is just a fantastic character and makes for most of the rest of the comedy throughout the rest of the game. Hell, even after you recruit Monoko and Noko to your crew and they finally make it to Old Lumiere, at one point he just tries to show off in front of the others, so when he screws up and splits the team up, he starts having a crying fit out of nowhere for pretty much no reason. It's surprisingly funny.
Monoko, why the hell did you...
Sorry, I fucked up. I just wanted to show off.
We just have to regroup. The others should be fine. Verso said the heart is in the center of Old Lumiere, right?
Right. Okay, Monoko, stop crying. We have to move.
So the cast is split up, with Ciel, Lune, and Monoko on one side, and Verso, Noko, and Myel on the other side. While Lune and the other two are exploring their side of Old Lumiere, they come across a journal from a previous expedition, Expedition 58. Lune then finds out that Myel might be in danger while she reads the journal. Why? We don't know. as it then cuts to black and we get the perspective of Verso and Myel. This is such a nice little change of pace because now suspense begins to build up. Ciel and Lune still don't completely trust Verso, hinting at the idea that he might be hiding something before this. And when she is reading the journal, it seems to hint at something suspicious that he may have been involved in. So then when it immediately cuts to Myel with Verso, and no one else besides Noko, and you spend a significant amount of time with the two, adding on to the suspense and dread. There's a famous quote from Alfred Hitchcock regarding a distinct difference between suspense and surprise. The quote is more about how you have two people sitting at a table and then a bomb goes off. That's it. It was a surprise, but prior to this, it was a relatively normal scene. Now suspense is where you see someone place the bomb and then set it to explode at 1 o'clock and then the two people sit down. In this scenario, the conversation becomes more and more fascinating because the audience is participating and are more involved with the story. This is one of those occasions, among many others, that happens in Expedition 33. Myel is on her own with someone who they barely know, is decades older than they are, and for the most part has mostly kept to himself ever since he joined. And then he disappears, leaving Myel completely alone aside from having Noko with her, as you go further into Old Lumiere, where we finally get to see a giant manor in the middle of the location. Myel approaches the manor and she sees an ethereal woman that also looks eerily similar to the curator. Verso rushes in before they get blocked from this woman by a familiar face.
This was your plan.
This is where we get one of the many reveals in the game, and probably the most obvious one, not gonna lie, and that is Verso is Renoir's son. The rest of the team finally shows up, asking some pretty fair questions before you finally go to fight Renoir once again, and again, the music. Just listen.
Right, can we talk about this later? I'd really like for you all to survive this.
You beat Renoir and he's about to unleash a powerful attack that hits the team, which leads to another unfortunate loss. Myel rage attacks Renoir, and before he counterattacks, Verso jumps in the middle, shouting, These time stop moments with Myel and this mysterious girl are pretty good. It seems to dance around the idea that these two might be, or probably, might be the same person. Doubly so when the girl then takes off her mask, showing her face. It adds to a sense of mystery to Myel's character and her overall importance in the story, which we will get further into this video. Myel asks for her name, the girl then walks away, putting her mask back on, and then both the manor and Renoir vanish into thin air, and the mission has failed. This next scene back at the camp is also very good. Lune confronts Verso's lie by omission, Ciel tries to calm the two down and emphasizes the importance of trusting each other, and even mentioned that Verso technically hasn't steered them wrong yet, and we see Monoko put Noko in a little pot. Lune asks about the possibility of Gestal's reincarnating, and Monoko says that while it is possible, it wouldn't be the same Noko that we know of, as that Gestal's memory would be erased. I love when stories do this because the loss of the Noko that we knew throughout the game is definitively gone, much like Gustav. Then we finally get into Plan B of getting to the monolith. It is said that the expeditioners cannot get close to the monolith as the barrier surrounding it would wipe out anyone that gets near it. But Lune reads about the possibility of the curator being able to create a weapon that can pierce the barrier, but Verso mentions that they need to kill the axons in order to get the pure chroma needed to create it. Again, filling in the dialogue is great quota. I know I keep mentioning it a lot, but it just really is, and I want to keep talking about it, so fuck you. This is where I want to talk about another tangent to briefly discuss the bosses. The bosses, unironically, combat-wise, are what I consider to be the most enjoyment I get out of the combat. They're all extremely fun, have interesting mechanics that make them stand out, and even have multiple phases to it, and some of them are a genuine challenge, especially when you get to the later sections of the game. God damn you, Simon. I mention this now because the next two main areas are strictly big whole levels with major boss fights at the end of it. The Visages and Siren. Visages, I think, is probably the better of the two because the whole level consists of destroying these masks, joy, anger, and sadness. And destroying each of these masks drastically weakens the main boss, and I mean, look at this thing. Visages as a boss is really good. Having a huge, hulking, godlike being trying to crush you is genuinely nerve-wracking, and it leads to the second phase where the true Axon shows up, the Mask Keeper. Fantastic design as well. Narratively, it works really well too, because after you beat him, he then throws the mask on the cast's faces, but the only one to remove her mask is Ciel. This is a really good choice to me because of all the characters, she's the one that really doesn't hide behind a mask. She is honest and wears her personality on her sleeve, giving her the chance to stop him. Siren is another really good part of the game with a stellar boss at the end. It centers around a massive coliseum filled with dancers scattered and other bosses as well. And at the center of the coliseum is her, Siren, she who plays with wonder. And ain't that the truth, because the music here is just the right amount of majestic and alluring, which is definitely intentional, as once you meet her face to face, she then shows each of those that the characters have lost. Myel with Gustav, Lune with her parents, Ciel with her husband, and Monoko with Noko. You break out of the illusions and fight her with Lune delivering the final blow to take her down. With both of the main Axons taken down, we finally break the barrier and head towards the monolith. There she is. Right there. Finally. Through all the blood, sweat, and tears, there is the Paintress. But then you realize that she isn't taking a lick of damage or reacts to it at all. But you do see a portal that takes you inside the monolith itself. It's kind of a neat little level that serves as like a gauntlet type section where you are shown previous levels that you've done to show that just how far you've come from beyond this point, while also showing you brief little flashbacks that shows memories of a family. Verso also sounding a bit more distressed as you progress.
Verso, what was that?
I don't know.
Fire. Again.
We then reach the peak of the tower, but before we meet her, we are met with one last roadblock. Renoir stands there, blocking the way, and I don't even need to say anything. Just see for yourself.
If saving you means losing you, then so be it.
We only need to incapacitate him.
We'll find a way to kill him.
It's
You defeat Renoir, and both Myel and the Curator erase Renoir, and we make our way to her, the Paintress. Finally, after all the hell that you went through, you finally get to face the one who started all this mess in an epic showdown, and the epic showdown we are going to get. Not gonna lie, this might be what I consider to be the best boss in the whole game. She has a wide variety of attacks that'll rinse you if you're not careful, meteors using shards of the monolith itself, and melee combos abound. But the boss elevates that even further when you get to phase 2, when you hop on SK's back and fly up to face the monolith Paintress, the big hulking chick in the back, and the Paintress herself. And good lord, the animations are some of the most peak cinema I have ever witnessed, accompanied with such a magnificent score. It's not very often where we get a score so majestic and beautiful for a character that can rip holes in reality.
Arrogant man. I taught him to paint, and he seeks to use my creations against me.
The Paintress is a fantastic boss through and through, and was worth all the hype, build-up, and suffering and depression that you experienced. And here, you get to the final phase, where she collapses, heals your teammates, and allows you to finish her off. And that's it. You did it. The Paintress is defeated, and you win. Myel and the crew stand at the top of the monolith, she vanishes into thin air, flowers bloom all around you, and you raise the flag. Expedition 33, the expedition that finally stopped the Paintress, and you can finally go home to Lumiere. The crowds cheer, everyone is smiling, everyone is happy. You give Gustav's journal to his apprentices, which is kind of sad also because they now have to realize that he's dead. And it's all just very positive. And then Verso even reads a letter from her sister, Alicia. Again, stellar dialogue. Then all the happiness washes away when the game immediately pumps the brakes and hits you in the gut when we have this.
Perhaps you differ from your father and your sister, as I differ from mine. Your mother paints life, whilst your father, death. What will you paint?
Everyone just vanishes. Gone. But why? We won, didn't we? This shouldn't have happened. What happened? And this is where we get to the part that I have been waiting for since the moment I decided writing the script. The major revelation in the story. We get a brief glimpse of Verso, and then we wake up to see Alicia woken up from her sleep to the sound of a woman asking you to come downstairs. This is where we learn the truth of the full story of Expedition 33, and I'm going to explain it as much as I can. Final warning, this is where we get into Omega spoilers. You've been warned. In this world, there exists two types of people, the painters and the writers. At the heart of this story exists the Descendre family, 5 painters that have the unique gift or curse, depending on how you look at it, with their unique ability to bring any art they create to life. There's Aline, the head of the Painters Council, and Renoir, the husband to Aline, and their 3 children that would shape their world both real and painted for better or worse. There's Clair, the child prodigy, Verso, their beloved son, who valued music more than he did painting, and art, but his canvas became the seed for an entire world, and Alicia, the youngest of the 3, who, through her naivete, was drawn into the writer's influence and paid the price when a fire broke out that killed her brother and permanently scarred her. As she's now lost an eye, her face is horribly messed up, and she lost the ability to speak. After their loss in the family, each of the family members grieve in their own separate ways, and the health of their family declines rapidly. Aline retreated to the safety of art as her coping mechanism. Renoir struggled between loyalty to his wife while also taking care of his children. Alicia, struggling with the identity of her being the victim or the creator of her family's grief. And Clair, sought revenge against the writers. Clair should really count herself lucky. You should have seen the last time someone tried to go after a writer. Anyway, the one thing that kept Verso's memory alive was his canvas, where he and Clair would create such a world so vivid, so realistic, that it kept a part of his soul inside it long after his death. Aline, recognizing this and still being tormented by the loss of her son, repaints this realm, creating copies of her family so that she might dwell forever in a world where she is no longer consumed by grief. In these fantasy worlds, time flows differently, and chroma sustains life itself. However, it is said that staying too long inside a canvas can deteriorate you both in body and mind, and even could almost kill you. Renoir, out of love for his wife, enters the canvas in order to help her return to the world before the chroma of this world completely consumes her. Their clash would then tear Verso's canvas asunder as his world was torn apart, and that is what creates an event known as the Fracture, and would result in Aline erecting a giant barrier and monolith to keep her masterpiece preserved, and she stays there above the monolith while Renoir is trapped below it. Whew. Okay. How do I even begin with this? I barely even scratched the surface. The entire plot revelation recontextualizes everything we know about Expedition 33 as a whole. Everything we know about this game's story is completely turned on its head, and it left me, for a while, in disbelief. The expeditions, Lumiere, all of it is a painted amalgamation of a family's grief and inability to cope with said grief for decades. All the expeditions, the monolith, the countdown, some of the characters, they are all basically a byproduct of this massive conflict that would shape the story as a whole leading up to this point. I was at a loss for words when this revelation came up, and it is all told just so well, and that's kind of what makes it better, is that it works, and it is something that I do want to discuss more later on down the line, because it all comes together, and there's a reason as to why we had to put a pin on this for now. Clair mentions how both of their parents have been stuck in the canvas for quite a while, and the only real way to save them is by destroying the canvas entirely. Alicia, ensuring that her mother never sees it, hides the canvas somewhere where her mom won't be able to find it. And as she tries to enter the canvas, she then gets consumed by Aline's chroma and becomes one of her creations inside the canvas. And thus, Myel was born. And thus begins Act 3. Myel, now having both the memories of Alicia and Myel, returns back to the canvas and finds Verso. And again, the dialogue here is just, once again, phenomenal.
Alicia.
Actually, I prefer Myel.
I think I do too. But I'm not really Verso, and you're not really Myel, are you?
You're not Verso, no. You look and sound just like him, but you're you.
We then make our way to the center of Lumiere, where we meet who the creator was all along, and it is the real Renoir, finally returned to his normal form. After a conversation with him, he talks about how the best choice is to remove the canvas altogether, to which Myel has her, "But Dad, I want to stay and play with my friends," attitude, to which he says, "No, now go to your room," and takes over the chroma in the canvas, until Eskie and Monoko rescue you two, just in time for them to recuperate back at camp. Now that Myel knows that she has the powers of a Paintress, she brings back Ciel and Lune in order to catch up to speed. Their reactions? Relative calmness.
You fucking coward! You betrayed us!
I won't lie, I don't blame Lune for reacting this way, because Verso kinda just knew all along. He could have done so at any time and let any of them know, but chose not to. It's deceptive, it's lying to the people closest to you, but it's all for a greater purpose, and I'll explain why. With the gang back together, we now begin to embark on, as Monoko would put it,
time for the greatest expedition in history.
And we can now either go back to Lumiere or finish any other content before finishing the game. And this is where I want to take one final tangent and talk about the last aspect of this game that I've been holding off for a little bit, the world map and side content. Why did I choose to do so? Well, because it ties to my point where I do believe that the world map and side content is genuinely great and adds so much more to the package, but it also kind of shoots itself in the foot around the time we get to Act 3. Throughout the game, you unlock more abilities to traverse through the world map via the rocks that Eskie collects. One that lets him swim, one that makes him durable enough to break through corals that block your way, one that lets Eskie fly, and one that lets you dive underground if you get Eskie's relationship to max level. Every time you get a new rock for Eskie, that is where the game truly begins to open up, as you gain far more access to side content, including endgame bosses, separate challenges like the Gestal beaches and the Endless Tower, and additional side content for certain characters. Some of these side quests are really good, like how you find out what happened to Lune's parents, Myel reconciles and gives Painted Alicia closure, Monoko goes to revive Noko where you fight Golgra, and one where you help Ciel conquer her fear of water, and you learn why she hates water. And the reason for it is rough. It's found out that it's because after her husband died, she couldn't cope with his passing, so she kept swimming to the point where she exhausts herself and almost dies before Eskie saves her. And I mean, I don't even need to acknowledge this, but I will anyway. The world map just looks incredible. Some of the best visuals I have ever seen in a video game. And the endgame bosses and levels are genuinely great, with bosses like Clair, Simon being the massive standouts, and also some of the hardest in the entire game. There are even some cute little Gestal minigames in the Gestal beaches, stuff like platform games, volleyball type games, and you can even find even more Gestals throughout each area of the game that lets you buy weapons, cosmetics, and even other cool items if you choose to fight the Gestals. This is all amazing stuff that legitimately adds much more to the general package. But like I said, it also kind of shoots itself in the foot a little bit, and it leads to one gripe that I have with the game. More of a nitpick, if you will, and it happens as soon as we head to Lumiere and enter the climax. As you start Act 3, you gain a new Pictos called Painted Power, and this allows you to essentially remove the damage cap of 9,999. Myel gathers all the chroma from all the other expeditioners that have died not through the Gomage, but rather through getting killed by Nevrons, and we all head back to Lumiere to prepare ourselves for the final battle. The final fight is cinematic as all hell. all the previous expeditions fighting alongside you as you make your way through Lumiere. It's all really good from a hype standpoint, but it also felt a little too easy. In my playthrough, I played for about 50 hours total, and did a large majority of the side content besides the Simon boss, and other things I probably missed but don't know quite yet. I curb stomped a large majority of the climax, because I was so overleveled that most fights were ridiculously easy. Now again, this is a nitpick of mine, but I feel like the side content in a way almost comes to the detriment of the climax feeling challenging and satisfying. So now you kinda get stuck with a fork in the road. Either you do the side content and come back destroying everything in one shot, or you forego the side content altogether and just finish the game right away. And I'm not quite sure how to feel about that. I think the best way to resolve this issue is just to have the final battle scale with your level. So if you come into the final battle at say like next max level, the game can still feel challenging all the way to the end. Again, that's my 2 cents, as it is, I mentioned, a nitpick, and I don't hold it completely against the game. And also just can be choked up to personal preference. On a more positive note, now that we got to the final boss, I think it's time I give a bit of a hot take on who I consider to be the best character in the entire game. It's not Minoko, it's not Verso or Myel, although they're pretty close, and it's not Lune or CL. To me, the best character in Expedition 33 is Renoir de Sandre. Hear me out. The first major reason is his voice acting, as it is just top tier across the board. Andy Serkis freaking crushes it as Renoir, and it adds a whole layer of depth to his character, which I was incredibly impressed with every time he was on screen.
Please, I just want you to understand what this canvas means to me.
I do understand. I know how powerful and intoxicating it is. How deeply attached we can become to the worlds we pour our hearts and souls into. I was enthralled, and it nearly killed me.
It doesn't mean you have to erase Verso's canvas.
Child, do you think I want to?
I think all the reasons as to why I love Renoir more than any other character culminates here in the final conflict between the main characters. On multiple occasions, we see who Renoir is as a person in both his good and bad sides. Renoir is a loving and devoted family man who went into the canvas not out of control specifically, but rather out of love and protection for his wife. But Renoir is also controlling, and he knows this. He wants things done the way he wants to, and that's within his nature. But his reasons are mostly, at the end of the day, to protect his family and help them move on with their loss, and he thinks that destroying the canvas will be the best case scenario for them, no matter how much it makes them feel along the way. He understands more than anyone how intoxicating the power of creating life through art is, and he even mentions about how he almost lost himself to it, but it was Aline who pulled him out of that rut. So he wanted to return the favor out of love for his wife. Is it a harsh task to destroy Verso's canvas? Absolutely. He didn't even really want to originally. He's basically suggesting genocide of an entire world that they created. But he also knows that so long as the canvas remains, they will never truly move on. There's a video that Bricky did a long time ago about how you let certain characters do bad things. Not because that it's the right or wrong solution, but it's more so the fact that you believe that he would do it. And also because, well, I'm a fan of the Brickman. Anyway, but one of the biggest things that I feel is completely overlooked when it comes to Renoir's character is how people misunderstand the point with him. The conversation of the canvas itself, the conversation of whether or not if we should let all these people die and whether or not if Myel should stay the canvas means jack diddly frickin' squat, because Renoir doesn't care. He only cares about the fact that what happened to his family will never happen again. And that honestly kind of leads to some very interesting character moments with him, because all he cares about is his family. All he cares about is his daughter, and he could give a less of a damn about the rest of the universe. It all just makes for Renoir to be easily the best character of the game for me, because while I don't completely agree with how he's handling the situation, I believe he would do it, because to him, he sees that the safety of his family matters the most because he couldn't save his son. In fact, the best way to describe it is with this wonderful piece of dialogue between him and Myel.
You treat me as if I'm still 5!
I treat you as if the shadow from the worst day of our lives is going to suffocate you and take you from us too!
This, to me, is the best cutscene in the game by far, and it shows. Just watch.
Enough. I said, enough.
My God, I love these characters. It all culminates in such a phenomenal cutscene after you smoke through his final boss, in which he explains himself even further. And like I said, I don't really blame him at all. Seeing how their son's death completely shattered them in different ways, I don't blame him for wanting to destroy the thing that's basically holding them hostage. Myel convinces Renoir to stay inside the canvas for just a little bit longer. They share a nice hug before Renoir says this.
I hope you find peace. Hold on to each other.
Verso walks through the portal, and we see on the edge of this universe the real Verso sitting there and continuously painting without any hope of stopping. And now we reach the most pivotal moment in the game, choosing the fate of the canvas. Now, this is the moment that I was looking forward to talking about the most, choosing between Myel and Verso. Not since The Last of Us have I seen a video game's ending spark so much debate and discussion quite as much as this game did. Over the last couple of months, I have seen paragraphs upon paragraphs of debate and so many different opinions of the endings and the morality of the decisions at the end. And honestly, they're all kind of valid opinions. Every single one of them. On some occasions, I can see why people chose Myel, but at the same time, I personally chose Verso for my own reasons. And all these stem from just how amazing of characters both Verso and Myel are. Both Ben Starr and Jennifer English are giving performances of a lifetime here, and it really shows just how both characters progress throughout the game, so let's go ahead and break this all down. The theme of Expedition 33 is grief and how art connects people. As creatives, we often get lost in our own creations because to us, they would be considered just as real as life is. Sometimes people use said art or other things in order to help cope with the loss of a loved one, and if left unchecked, it can ultimately consume you. We have seen this through the actions of this entire family, with Myel being no different. Myel has essentially lived two separate lives at this point, one in the real world and one where she is miserable, wallowing in grief and in a world where she feels like she merely exists in. And then on the other hand is this painted world where she, while suffering tremendous loss still, has people she considers her other family and her home. A world where she feels like she can actually live the way she wants to. So I can totally see why people would pick her ending, because at first glance, it seems like the definitive choice. But Myel is also a naive kid, and doesn't fully comprehend the gravity of the choices that she's making here. In a way, she is also kind of making the same mistakes her mother did. Aline repainting Verso's canvas is how they ended up in this situation in the first place. And realistically, chances are, if it continued, who knows how much longer this world would hold, considering how the countdown on her monolith was to delay the inevitable, and removing her from the canvas only sped up the process. Myel is repeating the cycle, not fully comprehending that she is. She has good intentions, and she's well within her right to do so, but the negatives are too dire to ignore. Hence, we can see it in Myel's ending, where she brings everyone back, including Verso, only to then see the same paint marks her mother had on her face. And on the other hand, Verso is shown to be a liar, a secretive and untrustworthy person throughout the game, all the way to the end. And after growing and interacting with the rest of the cast, he gets a big dose of get over yourself and starts to open up more. And by choosing his ending, we are essentially sacrificing everyone that we know and everybody we grow to care about because of their family's inability to cope with the loss. All the characters that we love, all the people that we met would just be erased permanently for them. But at the same time, he really doesn't have a world to go back to like Myel does, as in the real world. He's a corpse at this point, so he's essentially a walking ghost that has been hurting his family more than it is benefiting them. And at the end of the day, he just needs to rest so that the family itself can move on. So in the strange way, he kind of embodies a lot of his father. Does it suck? Absolutely, but I do understand his situation. Ultimately, your choice will kind of just depend on how much you care for the people in the painted world versus the real world. Both endings have their pros and cons, but it's ultimately up to the player to really decide what they think is right. And I just am so pleased, and I love it so much. So, what do you choose at the end of the day? Do you choose the sad but unfortunate truth? Or do you keep the happy but cruel lie going? The choice is yours.
If you could grow old, would you find a reason to smile?
And honestly, that's Expedition 33 for you. Hot damn, man. So much to unpack. This game is the textbook definition of a masterpiece, if not the closest thing to it. It is the undisputed game of the year of 2025 for me, and even probably the entire generation as a whole, and not for the very widely memed strawman reasons. I think ultimately the reason why I hold this game in a higher regard that no other game can top is just this. It's the kind of game that comes around once in a generation, and one that the industry needs right now. A reminder about creativity and fun that makes video games art. Kojima making a Game of the Year contender for like the 10-umpteenth time is a no-brainer. We already know his pedigree. Nintendo making another banger 3D platformer is also a no-brainer, because despite their garbage business practices, their games stand on their own 2 feet and stand past the test of time. This feels like a once-in-a-lifetime event that I want to go back to over and over and over again. It is the textbook definition of, I wish I could wipe my memory and play it again. And the biggest reason is that this game helped me when I needed it the most. For the last 5 years and change, my grandfather suffered from dementia. And just 2 months ago, he finally passed away peacefully. I've watched such a loving and devoted family man completely deteriorate to the point where he was completely unrecognizable. And then, just not too long ago, he finally dies peacefully in his sleep. This game came at a time where I needed it, and I'm forever grateful. So instead of ending it out on how I usually do with these videos, I want to share a clip that my mom found of my grandfather from 4 years ago that holds near and dear to my heart. And to Sandfall Interactive, Ben Starr, Jennifer English, the developers, all of you, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And that is my love letter to Clair Obscur, Expedition 33.
Say what you want for Matthew in life. Like, what would you want him to aspire to?
All right. I want him to be successful in the things that he loves the most. And that's what I want him to do.